Hey, Squirrel Squad. I might call you guys, if I call you Senior Squirrel Squad, don't think I mean you're old. It just means you're over 13, with all this. And even with our other book, it's just taking us back to our childhood. I don't know. I may talk to a lawyer from YouTube just to make sure I'm okay, because I've got my channel labeled for adults, since I am monetized and all those things. I hope I don't have to stop my reading if I have to pick more adult type books, although I think Little Women and even The Little House on the Prairie, even though they're considered children's books, we like to read them as adults or hear them. Takes us back to our childhood, right? Okay, we were still in chapter 3 of Little Men called Sunday, but I stopped at Tea Bangs and Company. Poor Nat found them so fascinating. If you hear a little something, it's my little heater right here. It is cold. Make sure I got my volume up. Poor Nat found them so fascinating that he was with difficulty persuaded to go and deposit his first piece of portable property in Asia's storeroom. Then they went on again, and having made the acquaintance of the 2 horses, 6 cows, 3 pigs, and 1 Alderney Bossy, as calves are called in New England, Tommy took Nat to a certain old willow tree that overhung a noisy little brook. From the fence, it was an easy scramble into the wide niche between the 3 big branches, which had been cut off to send out from year to year a crowd of slender twigs, till a green canopy rustled overhead. Here little seats had been fixed, in a hollow place a closet made big enough to hold a book or 2, a dismantled boat, and several half-finished whistles. "This is Demi's and my private place. We made it. Nobody can come up unless we let 'em. Except Daisy. We don't mind her," said Tommy, as Nat looked with delight from the babbling brown water below to the green arc above, where bees were making a musical murmur as they feasted on the long yellow blossoms that filled the air with sweetness. "Oh, it's just beautiful," cried Nat. "I do hope you'll let me up sometimes. I never saw such a nice place in all my life. I'd like to be a bird and live here always." "It is pretty nice. You can come if Demi don't mind, and I guess he won't, because he said last night he liked you." "Did he?" And Matt smiled with pleasure, for Demi's regard seemed to be valued by all the boys, partly because he was Father Bear's nephew, and partly because he was such a sober, conscientious little fellow. "Yes, Demi likes quiet chaps, and I guess he and you will get on if you care about reading as he does." Poor Nat's flush of pleasure deepened to a painful scarlet at those last words, and he stammered out, I can't read very well. I never had any time. I was always fiddling around, "I don't love it myself, but I can do it well enough when I want to," said Tommy, after a surprised look which said as plainly as words, a boy 12 years old and can't read. "I can read music anyway," added Nat, rather ruffled at having to confess his ignorance. "I can't," and Tommy spoke in a respectful tone which emboldened Nat to say firmly, "I mean to study real hard and learn everything I can, for I never had a chance before. Does Mr. Bear give hard lessons?" "No, he isn't a bit cross. He sort of explains, and gives you a boost over the hard places. Sorry, I was looking at a message. Some folks don't. My other master didn't. If we missed a word, didn't we get raps on the head? And Tommy rubbed his own pate as if it tingled yet with a liberal supply of raps, the memory of which was the only thing he brought away after a year with his old master. I think I could read this, said Nat, who had been examining the books. Read a bit then, I'll help you, resumed Tommy with a patronizing air. So Nat did his best and floundered through a page with many friendly boosts from Tommy, who told him he would soon go it as well as anybody. Then they sat and talked boy fashion about all sorts of things, among others gardening. For Nat, looking down from his perch, asked what was planted in the many little patches lying below them on the other side of the brook. These are our farms, said Tommy. We each have our own patch and raise what we like in it. Only have to choose different things and can't change till the crop is in, and we must keep it in order all summer. What are you going to raise this year? Well, I calculated to have beans, as they're about the easiest crop of going. Nat could not help laughing, for Tommy had pushed back his hat, put his hands in his pockets, and drawled out his words in unconscious imitation of Silas, the man who managed the place for Mr. Bear. Come, you needn't laugh. Beans are ever so much easier than corn or potatoes. I tried melons last year, but the bugs were a bother, and the old things wouldn't get ripe before the frost, so I didn't have but one good water and two little mushmelons, said Tommy, relapsing into a Silasism with the last word. Corn looks pretty growing, said Nat politely to atone for his laugh. Yes, but you have to hoe it over and over again. Now 6 weeks beans only have to be done once or so, and they get ripe soon. I'm going to try 'em, for I spoke first. Stuffy wanted 'em, but he's got to take peas. They only have to be picked, and he ought to do it. He eats such a lot. I wonder if I shall have a garden, said Nat, thinking that even corn hoeing must be pleasant work. Of course you will, said a voice from below, and there was Mr. Bear, returned from his walk and come to find them, for he managed to have a little talk with every one of the lads sometime during the day, and found that these chats gave them a good start for the coming week. Sympathy is a sweet thing, and it worked wonders here, for each boy knew that Father Bear was interested in him, and some were readier to open their hearts to him than to a woman, especially the older ones who liked to talk over their hopes and plans, man to man. When sick or in trouble, they instinctively turned to Mrs. Joe, while the little ones made her their mother confessor on all occasions. In descending from their nest, Tommy fell into the brook. Being used to it, he calmly picked himself out and retired to the house to be dried. This left Nat to Mr. Bear, which was just what he wished, and during the stroll they took among the garden plots, he won the lad's heart by giving him a little farm, and discussing crops with him as gravely as if the food for the family depended on the harvest. From this pleasant topic they went to others, and Nat had many new and helpful thoughts put into a mind that received them as gratefully as the thirsty earth had received the warm spring rain. All supper time he brooded over them, often fixing his eyes on Mr. Bear with an inquiring look that seemed to say, I like that. Do it again, sir. I don't know whether the man understood the child's mute language or not, but when the boys were all gathered together in Mr. Bear's parlor for the Sunday evening talk, he chose a subject which might have been suggested by the walk in the garden. As he looked about him, Nat thought it seemed more like a great family than a school, for the lads were sitting in a wide half circle around the fire, some on chairs, some on the rug, Daisy and Demi on the knees of Uncle Fritz, and Rob snugly stowed away in the back of his mother's easy chair where he could nod unseen if the talk got beyond his depth. Everyone looked quite comfortable and listened attentively, for the long walk made rest agreeable, and as every boy there knew that he would be called upon for his views, he kept his wits awake to be ready with an answer. "Once upon a time," began Mr. Bear in the dear old-fashioned way, "there was a great and wise gardener who had the largest garden ever seen. A wonderful and lovely place it was, and he watched over it with the greatest skill and care, and raised all manner of excellent and useful things. But weeds would grow even in this fine garden. Often the ground was bad, and the good seed sown in it would not spring up. He had many under gardeners to help him. Some did their duty and earned the rich wages he gave them, but others neglected their parts and let them run to waste, which displeased him very much. But he was very patient, and for thousands and thousands of years he worked and waited for his great harvest." "He must have been pretty old," said Demi, who was looking straight into Uncle Fritz's face as if to catch every word. "Hush, Demi, it's a fairy story," whispered Daisy. "No, I think it's an airy-gory," said Demi. "What's an airy-gory?" called out Tommy, who was of an inquiring turn. "Tell him, Demi, if you can, and don't use words unless you're quite sure you know what they mean," said Mr. Bear. "I do know. Grandpa told me. A fable is a airy-gory. It's a story that means something. My story without an end is one, because the child in it means a soul. Don't it, Annie?" cried Demi, eager to prove himself right. "That's it, dear. An uncle's story is an allegory, I'm quite sure, so listen and see what it means," returned Mrs. Joe, who always took part in whatever was going on and enjoyed it as much as any young boy among them, or any boy. Demi composed himself, and Mr. Bear went on in his best English, for he had improved much in the last 5 years, and said the boys did it. "This great gardener gave a dozen or so little plots to one of his servants, and told him to do his best and see what he could raise. Now this servant was not rich, nor wise, nor very good, but he wanted to help because the gardener had been very kind to him in many ways. So he gladly took the plots and fell to work. They were all sorts of shapes and sizes, and some were very good soil, some rather stony, and all of them needed much care, for in the rich soil the weeds grew fast, and in the poor soil there were many stones." "What was growing in them besides the weeds and stones?" asked Nat, so interested he forgot his shyness and spoke before them all. "Flowers," said Mr. Bear with a kind look. "Even the roughest, most neglected little bed had a bit of heart's ease or sprig of mignonette in it. One had roses, sweet peas, and daisies in it." Here he pinched the plump cheek of the little girl leaning on his arm. "Another had all sorts of curious plants in it, bright pebbles, a vine that went climbing up like Jack's beanstalk, and many good seeds just beginning to sprout, for you see, this bed had been taken fine care of by a wise old man who had worked in gardens of this sort all his life." At this part of the airy-gory, Demi put his head on one side like an inquisitive bird, and fixed his bright eye on his uncle's face as if he suspected something and was on the watch. But Mr. Bear looked perfectly innocent and went on glancing from one young face to another. With a grave, wistful look, that said much to his wife, who knew how earnestly he desired to do his duty in these little garden plots. As I tell you, some of these beds were easy to cultivate. That means to take care of, Daisy, and others were very hard. There was one particularly sunshiny little bed that might have been full of fruits and vegetables, as well as flowers, only it wouldn't take any pains. And when the man sowed, well, we'll say melons in this bed, they came to nothing because the little bed neglected them. The man was sorry and kept on trying, though every time the crop failed, all the bed said was, "I forgot." Here a general laugh broke out, and everyone looked at Tommy, who had pricked up his ears at the word melon and hung down his head at the sound of his favorite excuse. "I knew he meant us," cried Demi, clapping his hands. "You are the man, and we are the little gardens, aren't you, Uncle Fritz?" "You've guessed it. Now each of you tell me what crop I shall try to sow in you this spring, so that next autumn I may get a good harvest out of my 13 plots," said Mr. Bear, nodding at Nate as he corrected himself. "You can't sow corn and beans and peas in us unless you mean we're to eat a great many and get fat," said Stuffy, with a sudden brightening of his round, dull face as the pleasing idea occurred to him. "He don't mean that kind of seeds. He means things to make us good, and the weeds are faults, F-A-U-L-T-S, faults," cried Demi, who usually took the lead in these talks because he was used to this sort of thing and liked it very much. "Yes, each of you think what you need most and tell me, and I will help you to grow it, only you must do your best or it will turn out like Tommy's melons, all leaves and no fruit. I will begin with the oldest and ask the mother what she will have in her plot, for we are all parts of the beautiful garden and may have rich harvests for our master if we love him enough," said Father Bear. "I shall devote the whole of my plot to the largest crop of patience I can get, for that is what I need most," said Mrs. Joe. So soberly the lads fell to thinking in good earnest what they should say when their turns came, and some among them felt a twinge of remorse that they had helped to use up Mother Bear's stock of patience so fast. Franz wanted perseverance, Tommy steadfastness, Ned went in for good temper, Daisy for industry, Demi for as much wiseness as Grandpa, and Nat timidly said he wanted so many things he would let Mr. Bear choose for him. The others chose much the same things, and patience, good temper, and generosity seemed the favorite crops. One boy wished to like to get up early, but did not know what name to give that sort of seed, and poor Stuffy sighed out, "I wish I loved my lessons as much as I do my dinner, but I can't. We will plant self-denial, and hoe it and water it and make it grow so well that next Christmas no one will get ill by eating too much dinner. If you exercise your mind, George, it will get hungry just as your body does, and you will love books almost as much as my philosopher here," said Mr. Bear, adding, as he stroked the hair of Demi's fine forehead, "You are greedy also, my son, and you like to stuff your little mind full of fairy tales and fancies, as well as George likes to fill his little stomach with cake and candy. Both are bad, and I want you to try something better. Arithmetic is not half so pleasant as Arabian Nights, I know, but it is a very useful thing, and now it is time to learn it. Else you will be ashamed and sorry by and by. But Harry and Lucy and Frank are not fairy books, and they are full of barometers, I guess. Yes, it's divided. Barometers and bricks and shoeing horses and useful things, and I'm fond of them, ain't I, Daisy? Said Demi, anxious to defend himself. So they are, but I find you reading Roland and Maybird a great deal oftener than Harry and Lucy, and I think you are not half so fond of Frank as you are of Sinbad. Come, I shall make a little bargain with you both. George shall eat but 3 times a day, and you shall read but 1 storybook a week, and I will give you the new cricket ground, only you must promise to play in it, said Uncle Fritz in his persuasive way, for Stuffy hated to run about, and Demi was always reading in play hours. But we don't like cricket, said Demi. Perhaps not now, but you will when you know it. Besides, you do like to be generous, and the other boys want to play, and you can give them the new ground if you choose. This was taking them both on the right side, and they agreed to the bargain, to the great satisfaction of the rest. There was a little more talk about the gardens, and then they all sang together. Gracious, it's getting late. The band delighted Nat, for Mrs. Bear played the piano, Franz the flute, Mr. Bear a bass viol, and he himself the violin. A very simple little concert, but all seemed to enjoy it, and old Asia, sitting in the corner, joined at times with the sweetest voice of any. For in this family, master and servant, old and young, black and white, shared in the Sunday song, which went up to the father of them all. After this, they shook hands with Father Bear. Mother Bear kissed them, every one from 16-year-old Franz to little Rob. Hal kept the tip of her nose for his own particular kisses, and then they trooped up to bed. The light of the shaded lamp that burned in the nursery shone softly on the picture hanging at the foot of Nat's bed. There were several others on the wall, but the boys thought there must be something peculiar about this one, for it had a graceful frame of moss and cones about it, and on a little bracket underneath stood a vase of wild flowers freshly gathered from the spring woods. It was the most beautiful picture of them all, and Nat lay looking at it, dimly feeling what it meant and wishing he knew all about it. "That's my picture," said a little voice in the room. Nat popped up his head, and there was Demi in his nightgown. Blah, 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 blah. Pausing on his way back from Aunt Joe's chamber, whither he had gone to get a cot for a cut finger. "What's he doing to the children?" asked Nat. "That is Christ, the good man, and he is blessing the children. Don't you know about him?" said Demi, wondering. "Not much, but I'd like to." Oh no, I hit on something. There we go. "He looks so kind," answered Nat, whose chief knowledge of the good man consisted in hearing his name taken in vain. "I know all about it, and I like it very much because it's true," said Demi. "Who told you?" "My grandpa. He knows everything and tells the best stories in the world. I used to play with his big books and make bridges and railroads and houses when I was a little boy," began Demi. "How old are you now?" asked Nat respectively. "Most 10. You know a lot of things, don't you?" Yes, you see, my head is pretty big, and Grandpa says it will take a good deal to fill it, so I keep putting pieces of wisdom into it as fast as I can, returned Demi in his quaint way. Nat laughed and then said soberly, "Tell on, please." Goodness gracious. Oh, we're almost done. It goes on forever. Sure, tell on, please. And Demi gladly told on without pause or punctuation. I found a very pretty book one day and wanted to play with it, but Grandpa said I mustn't. Showed me the pictures and told me about them, and I liked the stories very much. All about Joseph and his bad brothers, and the frogs that came up out of the sea, and dear little Moses in the water, and ever so many more lovely ones. But I liked about the good man, that's in capital letters, G and the M. Best of all, and Grandpa told it to me so many times that I learned it by heart, and he gave me his picture so I shouldn't forget. And it was put up here once when I was sick, and I left it for the other boys to see. What makes him bless the children? Asked Nat, who found something very attractive in the chief figure of the group. Because he loved them. Were they poor children? Asked Nat wistfully. Yes, I think so. You see, some haven't got hardly any clothes on, and the mothers don't look like rich ladies. He liked poor people and was very good to them. He made them well and helped them and told rich people they must not be cross to them, and they loved him dearly, dearly, cried Demi with enthusiasm. Was he rich? Oh, no, he was born in a barn and was so poor he hadn't any house to live in when he grew up, and nothing to eat sometimes but what people gave him. And he went around preaching to everybody and trying to make them good till the bad men killed him. What for? And Nat sat up in his bed to look and listen. So interested was he in this man who cared for the poor so much. I'll tell you about it. Aunt Jo won't mind. And Demi settled himself on the opposite bed, glad to tell his favorite story to so good a listener. Nursery peeped in to see if Nursey peeped in to see if Nat was asleep, but when she saw what was going on, she slipped away again and went to Mrs. Bear, saying with her kind face full of motherly emotion, "Will the dear lady come and see a pretty sight?" Is Nat listening with all his heart to Demi telling the story of the Christ child, like a little white angel as he is. Mrs. Bear had meant to go and talk with Nat a moment before he slept, and she found that a serious word spoken at this time often did much good. But when she stole into the nursery door, and saw Nat eagerly drinking in the words of his little friends, while Demi told the sweet and solemn stories that had been taught him, speaking softly as he sat with his beautiful eyes fixed on the tender face above it, her own filled with his beautiful eyes fixed upon the tender face above them, her own filled with tears, and she went silently away, thinking to herself, Demi is unconsciously helping the poor boy better than I can. I will not spoil it by a single word. The murmur of the childish voice went on for a long time, as one innocent heart preached that great sermon to another, and no one hushed it. When it ceased at last, Mrs. Bear went to take away the lamp. Demi was gone, and Nat was fast asleep, lying with his face toward the picture, as if he had already learned to love the good man who loved little children and was a faithful friend to the poor. The boy's face was very placid as he looked at it, and felt that if a single day of care and kindness had done so much, A year of patient cultivation would surely bring a grateful harvest from this neglected garden, which was already sown with the best of all seed by the little missionary in the nightgown. Phew! Chapter 3 was a doozy. That's the end. Thank you. Thank you. And the next chapter 4 will be called Stepping Stones. Have a great day. Hope to see you live at 5. Hope this goes up before then, but it may not. So, have a good day. Have a lovely weekend. Remember, Saturday and Sunday, I'm on live at 3. But today at 5, but you probably won't see this till afterwards. But anyway, be sweet. Don't be ugly. Bye-bye.